I'm Corbett Wall with DV Auction, here with your feeder flash for Friday, May the 16th, brought to you in part by Arvest Bank. Arvest Bank Agri-Finance Team believes in supporting hardworking ranchers with real lending solutions. From livestock to land and everything in between, all loans are subject to credit approval. For more information, go to arvest.com/agriculture. Also, Unionville Livestock Market in north central Missouri and Creston Livestock Market in south central Iowa. Both those barns you can find on DVAuction.com. Unionville Livestock is going to have a big consignment machinery sale coming up here next Saturday the 24th, and then they'll have another calf and yearling special sale coming up Tuesday, May the 27th. Now today, here on Friday, May the 16th, Creston Livestock Market up in Iowa, there's going to have a special bred cow and pair sale. They got several reputation consignments there of pairs and bred cows, and then Stan Leaders has got 2 fancy Angus bulls ready to go, guys, with superior genetics there. You can check them out at DVAuction.com. Major correction. Now, I told you on the last feeder flash video that we had a key reversal on Wednesday, and then sure enough, a major correction come out on Thursday with your board down hard, especially your back months on feeder cattle. They just think it's got too high. And you know, I'm asking some of my people that are in the business of commodity futures, and I say, what's going on here? And when they say, we've seen the mountain, that means that maybe the highs are in. And that's a little scary. We've been knowing as we've been going up through here that we were going to reach a top at some point. And of course we were hoping that we would find a nice flat plateau when we got to the top of the peak. Big flat one where we could land the plane. But it's likely going to be more volatile than that. And I spoke about that on the last feeder flash also. But another thing that may have had something to do with it, I saw it was well advertised that several big fund managers have suddenly become more optimistic about the future. And you know, ever since Trump came into office, they've kind of been downers, you know, thinking that we had a recession coming, and then when the tariffs come in, oh my gosh, you know, prices are going to get up, inflation's going to be bad, this and that and everything. But then all the successes that President Trump has had over the last several weeks and getting along good in the Middle East, and now we've got China coming to the table. They've dropped their tariffs down to just 10%, and then Trump in turn dropped his down to 30%. We got a deal done with Britain. A lot of the other ones are coming to the table. Now all of a sudden things are looking more optimistic. Well, when things look optimistic to big fund managers, they think, well, maybe we should pull our money out of the commodities and put it back into the stock market and things like that. But they're not going to resist the opportunity to dogpile these cattle futures when they know that they're so high, at all-time record highs. They'd kind of like to ride it down for a little bit and pick up some easy money. So it's likely that they may do that. And I'm not saying that the trapdoor's fallen out of this market, but the bearish technicals are overwhelming. And so we saw them take a toll on the market. Now the fat cattle market was steady to a little bit higher again, but still this thing is starting to weaken a little bit. We saw it on our feeder cattle cash sales on Thursday. It's starting to weaken a little bit, and then of course the futures falling so hard on Thursday. But you know, it's kind of like when you're on a roller coaster and you're going up the hill, and then all of a sudden it stops clicking, and you're like, uh-oh, here we go. But another analogy that I heard of today was, you know, it's like the old Hank Williams song, you know, why don't you love me like I used to do? You know, there's no more cattle today than there was a week ago. So the fundamentals are still good. The fundamentals are still going to be good for another year and a half at least. But you know, my hair is still curly and my eyes are still blue. Why don't you love me like you used to do? Well, the moods have just changed. And when the moods change, and we've got an industry here that is so dependent on a futures market that can be really volatile. It's a little bit scary, and I think it is scary here, and I think we're probably gonna back up quite a bit here on a futures market, and then the fundamentals are really gonna have to bow up and show how tight we are on cattle and prove it to the speculators and to the fund managers and them, and then when we'll bounce back up with our futures. And I think our cash markets will stay pretty good because our supply and demand fundamentals are so strong. But USDA estimated that beef production this year is going to be down 4.9%. Well, that will be supportive. And then all of a sudden we've seen our weights on our carcasses drop quite a bit. And I don't think there was any storm or really any reason for that, but we did see a report come out on Thursday with our actual slaughter information come out, and our weights had dropped down quite a bit. But let's talk about our board for Thursday. June live cattle futures down 277 at 211.17. August was down 352 at 205.85. Your back months on live cattle were all down big, from 372 to down 402. May feeder cattle were down 340 at 296.17. Now they're just leaving the index levels, which are still sitting up there over $3, but they're going to be backing off here too. But August feeder cattle down 615, ouch, at 295.82. We saw similar gains like that on Monday, but that seems like a long time ago now. But your back months on feeder cattle down 5.5 to down 645. July corn was up 3 cents a bushel at 448.5. Your July beans down 26.5 with some uneasiness about the soybean oil, which was down to limit. But the beans followed it down quite a bit, but down 26.5 on Thursday at 10.51 1/4. Look at your fat cattle trade, which we did see it kind of take off, and I told you on the last, I hate to keep saying I told you so, but I told you on the last report when we hadn't seen much fat cattle trade that I think it would still be higher, and it was. For the most part, the Northern Plains still has a lot of leverage there. Iowa sold 12,300 head before 2 o'clock on Thursday. They've sold 14,250 for the week. Live sales in Iowa on Thursday, 220 to 230. That's mostly $2 higher because it was mostly 227 to 230. Your dress sales were steady from 350 to 360. Nebraska sold 11,300 on Thursday early. They've sold 13,400 for the week. And live sales in Nebraska in that more narrow range where most of the trades were at, from 227 to 230. And dress sales from 355 to 358. Now Kansas, they sold 550 head, which is a lot less than Texas, which is a little bit curious there. Kansas kept thinking that they were going to glean on to the northern trade and they were going to get something like that, but it's not going to happen. Kansas sold from 219 to 220. They did have one high quality deal there up northern Kansas at 228, but for the most part 219 to 220, which is basically steady with last week. Then some dress sales in Kansas from 358 to 360. Now Texas sold quite a few, 4,750 on Thursday. They sold 5,100 for the week. And live sales in Texas from 218 to 220, and that is steady with a week ago. Did have one fat cattle auction to talk about. Kelowna, Iowa. Kelowna livestock sold 650 head of slaughter cattle. Market was $4.5 to $5 higher, with fed cattle there at the sale barn in competitive bidding, selling from 223.5 to 237. Box beef cutout values were up, but it was mostly on the select, and that continues to narrow that choice select spread, which is not normally typical for grilling season. But choice cuts up 54 cents at $349.90. Selects up $333 at $339.18. Your slaughter come back through the first 4 days of the week. Estimated cattle slaughter 459,000, which is disappointing. That's 10,000 less than this point a week ago, 16,000 less than this point the same week a year ago. And I mentioned your actual slaughter come back for the week ending May the 3rd. Your average dressed steer carcass weighed at 938 pounds, which sounds big, but that's 8 pounds lighter than just the previous report. And maybe they're digging into these cattle and pulling them so hard that we're dropping on the weights there. But talk about what else is going on. Livestock Risk Services. Of course, that's Dakota Moss, our friend that offices there at the Exchange Building at the Oklahoma National Stock Ranch in Oklahoma City. But they are your LRP specialists, him and all these agents that work right alongside of him. And this situation right here, this current situation, this correction is why we continue to suggest that you get an LRP, guys. Protect yourself. Find you a protection level in there, one that you can afford. You're going to get a little bit of help from the federal government paying that premium. But you know, some of these hedgers have been paying margin calls so hard, so long, they're actually a little bit relieved to see the board back off this much. And you know, that's not really the way things are supposed to be, but some of these guys are dug in deep with these margins that they've been paying for the last several weeks. Talk about how to get a hold of them. Go to livestockriskservices.com. Let's go to your feeder cattle market, brought to you by Specialty Risk Insurance. They are working to protect your livelihood. Your latest real-time index on DVAuction based on an 800-pound cash auction steer after your sales had pretty much all concluded on Thursday, sitting at $300.25. That was down 137. It's amazing how fast that board can come back to your cash markets, but when they're at this big lofty level, you know, your buyers are just aching to get some cattle bought a little bit cheaper. Your cash feeder cattle index from CME sitting at 302.17, and it is bound to make a big drop here the next time that it comes out. Your big sales on Thursday, Farmers and Ranchers Livestock in Salina, Kansas, sold about 2,500. They didn't have a lot of fair comparisons there, but the market was still $5 to $10 lower. Looked at Winter Livestock in Pratt, Kansas. They had over 5,000 head. Good run for them. It was mostly 9-weight steers. I mean, coming off wheat, and that's just how much heavier they are. Normally they'd be weighing in the 8s, but they were mostly weighing in the 9s. And those 9-weight steers in Pratt were $4 lower. But on the other hand, they had a lot of 8-weight heifers, and they were about $4 higher. And we've seen that this week earlier so far. But Pratt was your NationalBeefWire stick-out sale of the day. And you look at your best tested weights, and they were all on the bigger cattle there. But they had 195 steers, weighed 758 in your 7-weight category with a weighted average price of $290.60. 387 head of the 8-weight steers in Pratt averaged $865 at $280.82. That's a little bit off of where we've been selling them. And 2,381 9-weight steers in Pratt. Wow, that's a lot of 9-weight steers, guys. They averaged $944 with weighted average price of $278.88. And like I told you, that was pretty much straight up $4 cheaper than a week ago in Pratt. How about your heifers? That 197 weight heifers averaged $753 with a weighted average price of $274.12, and 563 head of 8-weight heifers averaged $839 at $269.90, and like I mentioned earlier, that was about $4 higher. Got several individual quotes to give you from all around. How about Mitchell Livestock Marketing in Mitchell, South Dakota? They sold 80 steers, weighed 775, likely going to be turned out at $314.50. That's a big quote, guys. How about on up further north at Napoleon Livestock, Napoleon, North Dakota? 67 steers, weighed 621 at $388, and it's dry up there, guys. How about a quote from Farmers and Ranchers in Salina, Kansas, was 63 steers, weighed 663 at $368.50. But the most impressive quote that I heard or saw of anywhere on Thursday in your Macrocin No BS top quote for the day come out of Valentine Livestock Auction in Valentine, Nebraska. It was the Abbott cattle that come in. They were light calves, but they were weaned. Fall calves weaned there. 104 of the heifers weighed 386 and bring 460 on the heifers. And then the brothers, 97 of those steers off the Abbott deal weighed 400 pounds smooth and bring 5 1/4 a pound. And that's your feeder flash for Friday.